So I'm going to replace the values of scenario 3, or let's start with scenario 3, and let's look at delta sales. Delta sales is delta P plus delta Q plus delta P times delta Q. What I'm going to do is to evaluate the formula. So I go here and I evaluate the formula. That means Excel is going to replace in the formula delta P by minus 10 and delta Q by plus 20. So I've got minus 20, then plus 20%. That gives me plus 10, minus 10 plus 20. And then I will calculate delta P, delta Q. Excel will do that. Plus delta P times delta Q. That gives minus 2%, minus 0.02. So if I sum up plus 10%, minus 10 plus 20, and minus 2%, which is minus 10 times 20, I get 8. Now, let me show you what we get if we calculate delta contribution margin, if we replace in the formula delta P and delta Q with their values. So delta P is minus 10. I divide over the contribution margin ratio, which is 20%. If you divide minus 10% by 20%, you get minus 50%. In other words, your contribution margin is impacted by a minus 50% parameter because of the change in price. Then you replace delta Q. Delta Q is plus 20. So you have on the one hand minus 50 and then plus 20. That gives you minus 30%. And then you will make the calculation of delta P over the contribution margin ratio times delta Q. So it's minus 10 divided by 20. You still get minus 50. You multiply that by 20%, and that gives you minus 10. Minus 30% minus 10 gives you a minus 40. I want you to understand that the price parameter played a negative role of minus 10% when you were looking at delta sales. It plays a role of minus 50% in the change in contribution margin formula because it is leveraged by a coefficient of 5. And in the sales formula, the minus 10% was offset by the plus 20. But in the contribution margin formula, when the minus 10% becomes a minus 50%, an increase in volume by 20% can't offset an increase in unit contribution margin by 50%.